Accepting this realization now somehow calmed her fears a bit. A decision had just been made, and she relaxed with an audible sigh. What was that big old sigh for? Tom asked. Sounds like you just made up your mind about something. Anne started slightly. She hadn't realized she had sighed aloud. I just got in touch with myself, she answered. Now, where's that coffee? They reached the coffee shop, and Tom stepped aside and opened the door for Anne. Thank you, Detective, she said as she entered the cafe. You're welcome, Detective, Tom replied with a bow and a flourish. Any time. They took a table and ordered 2 cappuccinos. They didn't speak while they waited for their orders. In a moment, the waitress brought the coffees and laid the ticket on the table. Tom reached for it, but was too slow, and Anne took the ticket and said, My treat. All right, said Tom. Thanks, I'll get the next one. After a few moments of silence, Tom asked, Anne, is there something you know that no one else does? I mean, is there something going on that nobody knows about that will affect the department? Why do you ask such a question? Why would you think something is going on that you don't know about? Well, it seems like just about everything that's happened since the Abbott killing has in some way included you, including the Abbott killing itself. At least you're solving the case. Nobody knows just how you did that one. And your car got trashed for some reason nobody knows. That was right after you and Billy had your little falling out. Then Billy's being in the hospital. That was right after you and Billy made up. Then Billy getting hurt and spending the night in the hospital. That was after you and Billy drank together at the pizza parlor bar. Then Billy's house blowing up. As I recall, everyone in the department had an opinion about that. That is, everyone except you. What's going on? Anne reddened slightly. Looks like you notice everything that goes on. At least everything that has to do with me. Are you wondering why the other guys are, what the other guys are up to? Or are you only interested in me? Hey, everyone has noticed all this. It's just I'm the only one who'll say anything about it. And maybe I hit a nerve. How about it? What's going on? Anne was quiet for a while. She appeared to be in deep thought, maybe trying to figure what to say next. The small muscles of her jaws tightened, and she relaxed. She stuck her finger into her coffee cup and withdrew it slowly, examining it closely as it came out of the coffee. And she held it up in front of her eyes and said, Coffee's cold. And she put her finger into her mouth and gently sucked it. She withdrew the finger and dried it with a napkin. Guess I'll go, she said. I got work to do. And she slowly stood up. She was looking across the table at Tom as he too arose. Tom, she said, do you know what the duties of a police detective are? I mean, do you know what a detective is supposed to do, to think about what a detective's job is? Puzzled, Tom replied, yes, I think I do. A detective is supposed to investigate crimes and solve them if he can. Make arrests whenever it becomes evident a crime has been committed. That's what we get paid for. That's our job. Well, since you know what your job is, how about you just mind your own business and do it? Then Anne walked out of the door and headed toward her house. Anne knew she should go back to the station house instead of home, but she desperately wanted complete privacy right now. And her house was the only place where she knew she could get it. When she arrived, she slowly opened the door and listened for a moment. The inside was quiet, and she entered the living room and walked to the sofa and sat down. She heard no sound except for the very faint hum of the refrigerator motor running. She thought it odd that the refrigerator motor would be running right now. Anne sat quietly, trying to relax her mind, trying to push all thoughts away from her consciousness. She felt strangely detached from her consciousness, spaced out, like an out-of-body experience, she mused. She sat very still for several minutes, breathing shallowly and slowly like a sleeping person. Then she heard a sound. It was very faint, maybe not a sound at all, but only her imagination. She willed her body, she willed her mind and body to reject the suggestion of a sound and to not respond. Then it was quiet, deathly quiet. Maybe she was the only person still alive. Maybe time had come to an end and there was no past and no future, and only she remained in the present, in a cocoon of time and space. No, it wasn't her imagination. There was the sound again, this time more compound, more insistent. It was a strange sound, as if made up by many parts, many different kinds of sounds together. Then, in an instant, Anne came out of the trance. Anne came out of the trance-like state she had been in and realized that there were indeed two different sounds. The phone was ringing and someone was knocking on her door. She knew the phone had been ringing insistently for some time. Whoever was calling knew she was there and would not give up until she answered. Now she heard a voice mingled with the knock at the door. It was the chief calling her name. She shouted, "Hold on, I'll be right there." And the knocking stopped. And then she picked up the phone and said, "Call back in half an hour," and hung up. She opened the door and saw the chief, red-faced and anxious, peering in at her. "Come in, boss," she said. The chief came in and looked around as if he expected to see someone else there. "Anne," he asked, "are you all right?" "Sure," she said, "I'm just fine. Why do you ask?" "I just spoke to Tom Shelton, and he said you were acting strange. So when you didn't come back to the station, I thought I'd better check up on you." "Tom's a worrywart," said Anne, "and he is also sometimes a little too nosy." "I'm okay. This thing with Billy just has me a little on edge. I'm beginning to wonder if being made a detective was such a good idea. Now I feel like I should always be solving something. Maybe the responsibility is too much for me. I kind of wondered if that could be bothering you. If it makes you feel any better, though, in a small town like Tulsa City, the biggest difference in being a detective and a regular cop is not having to wear a uniform. Maybe we razzed you too much about being detective grade. Maybe you need to relax a little. Now that Billy's gone, things will get a little easier for you. I don't know what, if anything, you two had going between you, and I don't want to know, but whatever it was sure wasn't good for you, or him either, I reckon. Maybe whatever it was just a problem neither of you needed." Anne's face reddened, and she opened her mouth to protest the chief's remark, but immediately thought better of it. How could she object to what he was thinking if she couldn't explain why she was objecting? Then it occurred to her that she can use this as her out. "Well, maybe so," was all she said. The chief looked at her intently, and he realized she had said all she intended to say. He also realized that she hadn't asked him to sit down or offered coffee or done any of the other things that would indicate she wanted him to stay. She wanted him to stay a while. So he decided to take his leave. "All right, detective, if you're okay, I'll leave you alone. Come on back to the station house whenever you feel like it." And he turned and walked out the door. "Thanks, Chief," Anne said. "I'll be along in a while." And she closed the door behind him. This is the end of Chapter 7. I hope you enjoyed it. Chapter 8 is coming soon, and maybe I'll be in a little better voice. Thank you very much. This is JC. I'll see you down the road, if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise.